Hello there, my name is Irfan and I'll be presenting on my pragmatic analysis on the movie The Courier for my EIC 602 assignment. Let's begin, shall we? And now brief on the pragmatic failure. Pragmatic failure is defined as a linguistic element that causes breakdown or failure in the communication process. Manuel explained that pragmatic failure causes when a speaker uses an utterance or a linguistic element that causes the listener unable to listen or being misunderstood, thus causing barriers towards an effective communication process. Now, he added that L2 learners are the ones that are commonly experiencing this problem, as they are unable to understand the utterances or words that are being used by speakers from another culture. Now, as globalization rises during the apex of the age of internet, intercultural communication became a vital tool in interaction with other culture, thus more prone towards the exposure of pragmatic failure. Now, the synopsis here is as follows. The Cold War is now at an all-time high between Western and Eastern Bloc, as now a full-scale nuclear war became imminent in the 11th hour. Amidst the conflict, a salesman known by the name as Gravel Win volunteered to become a spy. After hearing pleas of help from within the Soviet Union's ranking by a man named Oleg Penkovsky. Now, experience Gravel's harrowing experience evading the Politburo and the Gulag as he fulfills his mission for the sake of the world, based on real-life story as well. Now, among the justification that I use for the pragmatic analysis is because the depiction of intercultural or ideological clash between the Eastern Bloc, which represented by Russia, versus the Western Bloc, which is represented by the UK and US. Second is by the use of pragmatics as a tool, becoming contextual identifiers during a conversation, and last but not least, familiar values that can be valuable for me and others to learn for the pragmatic analysis process. Now, critical incident 1 depicts conversation between Gravel and James and Helen at a local restaurant. James and Helen asked Gravel about Eastern Europe before they asked whether Gravel would be interested working in the Soviet Union. Later then, they revealed themselves to be as intelligence officer and would offer Gravel to be working in gathering intelligence at the Soviet Union. Now, Gravel, who is at first confused, then asks about the risk involved and why he is being chosen for the job. James and Helen would assure that he will be working as normal as a salesman in the Soviet Union before briefing on the mission. In the end, Gravel accepts the mission before asking more inquiry later elsewhere. Now, the concept of cooperative principle have been identified from the following scene. Hamid explains that cooperative principle occurs when both listener and speaker understood and agree on the context given in a message during a conversation. Now, James and Helen are trying to offer James to become a spy gathering intelligence on the Soviet Union. But since Gravel's lack of expertise makes him not be able to understand the work scope that needs to be done in that particular field. Thus, the lack of context and information given by Helen and James towards Gravel throughout the conversation demonstrate the cooperative principle. Now, reasons for pragmatic failure in critical incident 1 is due to the violation of the maximum of quality. Now, the secretive conversation is caused by external factors such as working experience, working position, and most of all, the objective of keeping the mission secrecy from Gravel by James and Helen. Now, according to Karen, British culture tends to use indirectness in message as a way to avoid conflict and improving relationship. Now, James uses terms such as, for example, nothing dodgy, nothing illegal, just do what you would naturally do, as a way to keep the mission briefing discreet and to making sure that Gravel maintains his persona as a salesman as he gathers intelligence from the Soviet Union. The next reason for pragmatic failure in critical incident 1 is the violation of the maxim of manner. Now, Hamid explains that violation of the maxim of manner occurs when an excessive use of information and ambiguous question marks causes listeners unable to decipher or understand the meaning of the speaker's intention during a conversation. Now, we can see here is that both James and Helen did sufficiently provide enough information to Gravel about the job that he needs to be done gathering intelligence on Soviet Union. James's use of expression and Helen's ambiguous question makes Gravel unable to understand what he needs to be doing as a spy gathering intelligence on the Soviet Union. Now, among the effects of pragmatic failures from the critical incident 1 is the reduced comprehensiveness and ineffectiveness of the intercultural communication. Now, Hamid explains that the message would soon become incomprehensible, causing the interlocutor's message to become jargon that cannot be understood by listeners in a conversation. Now, we can see from the scene is that as a result, Gravel cannot comprehend the meaning of the job that he needs to be doing, thus would cause him to be disinterested and would most likely be refusing the job offer by James and Helen at the end of the conversation itself. Now, among the recommendations that can be provided from critical incident 1 is number 1, by adding in relevant information. So, in this example, James and Helen should have provided a more detailed briefing of the mission, or at least a written document to Gravel to increase Gravel's comprehensiveness. Now, the second one is through the use of equal language competency. In this case, James and Helen should reduce their level of language to be on the same level as Gravel by using a much more familiar words in the conversation to increase comprehensiveness and also to increase compatibility between speaker and listener in the conversation itself. Now, critical incident 2 depicts conversation between Gravel and James and Helen following the first mission at a local restaurant. Now, James and Helen wishes that Gravel to continue his work following Penkovsky's decision. But Gravel refuses the offer, saying that he has a family to return to. This follows an argument between Gravel and Helen before a deafening silence occurs, which then Helen proceeds by producing facts towards Gravel and also by contemplating Gravel's decision on refusing the offer. The conversation ends with a disgruntled note from Gravel, which ended the conversation on a bad note. Now, we identify the concept of presuppositions and entailment from critical incident 2. Nicholas explains that presupposition exists as a statement and factual information from an individual's perspective during a conversation. Now, in the scene, James and Helen suggest Gravel to continue his work gathering intelligence in Soviet Union. Now, an argument occurs when both James, Helen, and Gravel counter each other, causing disagreements throughout the conversation. Now, Gravel, being unable to understand and recognize the magnitude of the issue of the nuclear war, shows an example of the principle of presupposition and entailment. Now, reasons for pragmatic failures in critical incident 2 is due to the failure in understanding other state. Now, Gravel's lack of effort trying to understand the gravity of the situation when discussing in the topic from the following scene. Now, according to Devine, this shows that in Hofstede's dimensional culture is that British culture tends to be more lean and relaxed, not to be wary of the future that they cannot control. Now, from the scene given is that despite previous experience witnessing nuclear weapons being used at the end of World War II, Gravel thought that no nation would be wise enough to repeat the same history again. This also solidifies that James refuted Helen's facts and proceed to end the conversation by exiting it. The next reason of pragmatic failures from critical incident 2 is the use of counterfactual presupposition. Now, according to Nicholas, is that counterfactual presupposition occurs as listener dismiss information that is being provided and also refuse to believe the statement from a speaker during a conversation. Now, from the scene given is that we can see the expression "come on" used by Gravel indicates a sign of rebuttal against the idea that a nuclear war could ever happen in the first place. Now, Gravel's denial of possibility of a nuclear war shows how he dismisses Helen's fact, only to realize later the direness of the situation based on the expression given by Helen through its brief silence in the following scene. Now, among the effects of the pragmatic failures that occur in critical incident 2 is the rise of conflict and misunderstanding. Now, according to Christina, is that anxiety will happen between the speaker and listener, causing misinformation and conflict in the conversation, thus creating barrier towards an effective communication. Now, we can see is that James and Helen's insistence to ask Gravel to become or continue his work as a spy causes Gravel to become discomfort throughout the conversation process. Now, Helen's also use of guilt trip against Gravel backfired, causing tensions between them. As a result, Gravel shown to be uncooperative and also unwilling to accept the offer, thus disrupting the communication process. Now, among the recommendations that can be provided from critical incident 2 is by number 1, be open-minded and tolerant towards others. Now, this can be done by avoiding hasty decisions and be reasonable when listening to others' opinion. So, in this case, Gravel should be more tolerant by hearing James and Helen's opinion and should be more considerate on realizing the effects of his refusal that can be of consequences towards others throughout the conversation. Now, the second is by using a more visible approach. Now, in this case, James and Helen should be using a more subtle approach or a softer technique to convince Gravel to continue his work by reducing hostilities between them, and also by convincing Gravel that by doing this work is a job of miracle and could be benefit for the world. Now, the summary for my pragmatic analysis is as follows. Number 1, which is cooperative principle. Now, cooperativeness and information plays a key role in determining the comprehensiveness of the message in a conversation. Now, either by sending out too little information or by sending out too much information would cause a pragmatic failure in the communicative process. Now, for the second one, which is presupposition and entailment. Now, open-mindedness and consideration are a vital part towards common consensus in an effective communication process. Now, disregarding presumption and also opinion of others would cause pragmatic failures, and also affirming your own opinions and disregarding opinion will cause conflict and misinformation, thus disrupting the communication process. I hope this pragmatic analysis would be beneficial for all of us in the near future. Thank you.